So today I'm going to be introducing you to Sketchup Free. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are with Sketchup Free. Now this is online only, so all you need is a good web browser. I'm using Firefox. This will work perfectly fine with most other browsers. So this is the address you can type in to get there, app.sketchup.com. You don't actually need that last little bit in there. And when you first type that in, it's going to bring you to a page like this. So we can go and get rid of our cookie thing here. And you've got some choices. You can either create a whole new account, or you can sign in with an existing account. I myself use a Google login, so sign in with Google. Use this one. I didn't actually set up my tutorial stuff under this because I was actually using my personal account when I started learning. So you'll need to agree to their terms and click OK. Now we can go start modeling. So they're just going to give you a few little tips as you go when you're first setting up with this. So it's pretty easy. When you go to set up a new project, it's gonna dump you into this default one. So you can just click up here where it says Untitled. And you always want to save your projects into SketchUp. And now you can make a folder structure inside of here, but you probably won't. So you can just give your project a name. And you can see up here it says saving. So I'm just going to pop back to our reference page here. So we're going to talk about the interface here in a moment, but these are just some of the basic things that we're going to cover today. It looks pretty complicated and fancy, but it's really not. That's one of the things that really kept me working with SketchUp Free is it is so intuitive and easy to learn. So I'm going to actually show you a couple quick projects here that I was able to do with only about 3 weeks of learning this. All right, so you can see there's some pretty advanced stuff in here. So if we'll zoom in on a couple things. So here's the bottom part of a lamp that I reproduced, and globe and a half globe. We even got a spring, and we've got these fancy shapes over here and a bolt. So this is all done with SketchUp Free rather. So this was all done except for a couple of items that I was able to download, like this little keyboard and mouse combination over here. I downloaded that, and I downloaded this little graphics tablet and made some minor changes to it. And I downloaded the printer up on the shelf, but everything else in here I built myself using SketchUp Free. And I was at about 2.5 to 3 weeks when I was pretty much done with this. So it's actually pretty amazing what you can learn to do in this program in a short period of time. So we're going to go back to our example over here, and this fellow right here is, don't know what his name is supposed to be, but we don't really need him, but he's there for scale, so we'll leave him there just for now. But you can just select him and delete him. So let's talk about getting around the interface here. You've got two main controls for moving around. So you've got this orbit control here, and I'm getting to this by holding down the middle button on my 3-button mouse. Now that's something that that you are going to need. It's almost impossible to use this program without a 3-button mouse. Now most modern mice or trackballs like I use, they've got the scroll wheel you can push down as a button, and that's your middle button. So that's how you get your 3-button mouse, even though it only looks like there's 2 buttons with a scroll wheel. Now that's most of them, not all. Make sure you've got a fairly decent quality one because you're going to be using that scroll wheel button a lot. So you hold down that scroll wheel button and then move your mouse or the trackball, and then you've got a modifier key. So if I hold the shift key down, then I can do this and just slide around. Now there are some keyboard shortcuts you can use for some of this, if I can remember what they are now. I think if you hit H for horizontal, then that brings up your slider control, and then you just hold your normal mouse button down and move around. Okay, and if you hit your space bar, and it'll get you back to your pointer tool, or you can go over here and click on it on your toolbar. We'll talk about these tools a little more in a minute. If you hit the O key, then that will give you your orbit tool, and then you can use your left mouse button. So you can do this with a regular 2-button mouse. It's just a lot easier with a 3-button mouse. And technically you can do it with a trackpad, but I certainly wouldn't want to. Right now I'm showing you this on my Windows system. I've got Windows 10. But when I was actually learning this, I was doing it on my Mac, and it works the same in Mac. Although my Mac is so old, it's only a quad core, so it's pretty slow. But in any case, I tried using the trackpad on that to control this, and it just doesn't work very well. All right, so we'll hit the space bar to bring back our pointer. And now you've got your scroll wheel, and you can use that. Let's just get positioned here a little bit. So you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And you'll see this popped up. It'll ask you if you want to use your mouse or trackpad, but I would normally just use mouse. Okay, and we can get rid of that. And scroll it the other way to zoom back out. Okay, the next thing we'll talk about here is you've got some arrow keys on the keyboard that you're going to be using all the time. So that's how we set our orientation on something. So let's just grab the rectangle tool here. Let's just grab the rectangle tool here real quick. So you can grab it from your toolbar over here. If I actually click on it, you'll see you get all these little sub menus fly out. So we would just pick this one here, or you can just click on this twice and then that little menu goes away, and whatever one was already selected is the one you'll get. Okay, so now you'll notice that, hopefully you can see here that the rectangle is being outlined in blue. Actually, I've got to get rid of this here. I keep forgetting this. One thing that you don't normally do in this program is click and drag with something. Normally you click and release, and then you pull it out like that. And see that little line that just popped up across the middle there? And you see golden section popped up. So that's because you've created a rectangle that's adhering to the golden ratio. So we call it a golden section. And if you get it sized just right, it'll also pop up and tell you when you've got a perfect square. But in any case, if you use your arrow keys, you can change the direction of how you're drawing this. So your left arrow will lock you to the green axis. You see that green line that's going off in the distance here. So that's your green axis. You've got your red axis on the front, and then the blue is the Z axis. So your left mouse will lock it to that green axis, and you'll see how now the rectangle is standing up. Now your right arrow will lock it to the red axis. It doesn't matter what direction you're facing, it'll always lock it to the red axis, so the right arrow. So now you can see what that does with that. And the up arrow will lock it to that z-axis. Now it's going to draw this flat on the z-axis, which is why it chooses the colors it does. And now the down arrow, that's for something else. And I'm not going to trouble you with trying to remember that now, so we'll talk about that later on another tutorial. Okay, so something else to note too is you'll notice down in the lower right hand corner, so sorry, down here, you'll notice those numbers are moving as we're creating this rectangle. So if you want to specify an actual size, you'll notice that it's in feet and inches. Now you can change that, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But you can type numbers in here directly. So if I was to type in 6 feet, comma 6 feet, then we'll get a perfect square, and we just hit enter. Now that actually kind of looks rectangular, but that's just because of the angle we're looking at it. So if we orbit a little bit, you can see that actually is a perfect square. Being able to type stuff in while you're in the middle of creating something is one of the really powerful tools of this program. Okay, so if after you've got a project created, you want to work in something else, we've got this little menu over here on the right. And this is like a little flyout. We've got a whole bunch of new things you can do. Here's our main display settings and stuff. Here we've got our model info. So here is where we can change it if we want to go from 1/2 inch to, instead of using fractions, we can use decimals, set the number of decimal places. You can choose millimeters, centimeters, meters. Now, I will point out that even when you've got this set up to be used a certain way, you can still go in and put in millimeters if you want. You just have to type mm after the number you're putting in so it knows you mean a millimeter. And then you can set your fractional precision. So it normally defaults to 1/16 of an inch. And you can set up your snap interval here. And then you can open this up to preset your angle units and precisions. Okay, so we can close that part. And another common one you're going to use a lot is component info. So here you see we got this selected, so his name's Ty. So when you're working with shapes here, if you click once, it'll select the shape. If you double click, it'll select whatever lines are attached to that face. And you can have a line without a face attached to it. And when you have multiple objects, then if you triple click, it'll select everything that's kind of connected to each other. So there are some other things that you can look at here, but they're a little bit more advanced. So we'll be covering those in a later tutorial. Although you're going to see me going in and out of this a fair bit as we go through some of this stuff. So if I gloss over something, most of the time it's because we're going to be covering it in greater detail later. So for this rectangle here, you can also use the letter R, and that'll give you your rectangle tool. Make another rectangle. Now you see it's telling us we've achieved that square. I'm using the letter C. Or you can come over here, you've got your circle tool, and this gives you some other options as well. You've got Polygon tool and 3D text, and of course your rectangle tool is located here as well. So when you're going back and forth all the time like this, this is where you're going to want to start learning the keyboard shortcuts. So once again, we can draw a circle, and I'm actually breaking the rules because I'm dragging this circle when I shouldn't be. So we're going to get rid of that. So once again, so I just click and release, and then I drag it out. And you'll notice when I get to a particular axis so that I'm right on it, it changes color and locks it on. You can also pick the size of your circle and type it in manually, and it's done by radius. So we can type in, let's say we want this to be 24 inches. So I'll just type in 24, hit enter. Now the other thing that we should be aware of too is when you draw a circle, So let me actually just get out of this tool. Let me bring the circle tool back up. Now before I type anything or click the mouse or anything, you'll notice in the lower right hand corner there, it shows sides and then a number. So it doesn't actually draw a true circle. It draws circles in segments. So if we were to zoom in on this one and look close, as we zoom in, you'll see it's actually straight sides. So it's got 24 segments that make up this circle. Now, programmatically, it sees it as a circle, but to display it easier without taxing your processor, it sets a set number of segments. Now it defaults to 24, but you can set that to whatever you want within reason. So I think the least you can do is 3. So if I was to type in 3, and you'll see we've now got a triangle. So I could change that to 4, and we've got a 4-sided circle. It's not actually a true rectangle, it still sees it as a circle. It takes a little getting used to thinking the way this works, but so I'm going to type in, let's say 48, and it will draw another circle that is 4 inches. Okay, so if we zoom in on these side by side, see how much smoother the one on the right looks, but when you zoom in enough, you can see it's still straight segments. The other thing I should mention too, when you're navigating the interface, it's really tempting to try and move around really fast when you start working on larger projects. And unless you've got a specialized interface that's meant for 3D interfaces, it's probably not a good idea. What I've found over time is that it's better to work in small movements. So if I was to start here at the bottom and flip this over, as soon as I reach the top, it doesn't do anything anymore, right? It exits the viewport, so the code can't track the mouse. So it's better to just move it in smaller increments like this. When you start dealing with a lot of objects in 3D on screen, you can get lost in a hurry. So there's a few things you can do if you get all kind of messed around, discombobulated, don't know where you are. So let's say you're way into something like this and you're like, where the heck am I? So you can always come over here, click this, and then this little magnifying glass with the 3 arrows. So we click that and it just centers you back on a bit of an elevated view. So you can always get back to your base. So now we've got the Polygon tool, which is another one you'll use quite a bit. And even though it's polygons, it behaves exactly the same as a circle. It just sees it slightly differently as far as using it and moving it and drawing them and setting your sizes and segments and all that. That's all the same as a circle. The next thing to be really aware of in SketchUp is faces versus edges. So every 2-dimensional object, if it's a full object that you're going to be able to use with 3D, then it's going to have face and side. Now the reason this is important is because sometimes you need to move edge separately from a side. So if I wanted to actually resize this, I can take just this, I can grab the move command, I can click on that, and then I can move that, and that'll resize just the one direction. And I can lock it to my red axis with that right arrow key. So now it doesn't matter where I move my mouse, it is locked to that. So that's one of the reasons that you need edges. There's a lot of other reasons why. It has to do with kind of what's behind how 3-dimensional stuff works and related to CAD and all that stuff. And I'm not a CAD guy, so a lot of this stuff I don't understand. I'm no genius or architect or draft person or anything like that. I started using this when I needed to do a little project, and I went down the rabbit hole. I got addicted really fast. That's why I wanted to create this series, was to just show people how easy it was to get into this and start doing stuff. And there are times when you're going to do something, an edge that's separate from the face, but we're going to be showing you what all that can entail in other chapters. Now let's talk about push-pull. So this is how we make a 3D object. You start by creating a 2D base object, and then we can push-pull. So you can find that over here. This is the push-pull tool, and you have some other options to go with it, which we'll get into a little later. So now if I go to this face, if I just click on this and release and then move my mouse in a direction, it'll start to extrude this up, or I can extrude it down. So once I've got it going in the right direction, I can once again pick a size. So I can say, let's make this 48 inches. And same with these other shapes. Let's make this 24 inches. So you can see it's pretty easy. Now you can also do push-pull inside of other objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the rectangle tool here again, and we're going to draw on the face here. We're just going to draw a little rectangle and get our pointer tool back. Our push-pull, which you can access with P on the keyboard. And then we can click that face and push it through. And if you want it to cut a hole all the way through, you need to hit your back edge here. You'll see it'll light up that little square. So it's going to snap to that edge. You click that, and now if we look, you can see it cut the hole right through it. So we could come up here and let's grab the circle tool, and let's draw a circle on the face here. Let's make it a little smaller. Okay. Now we can grab our push-pull, and we could either do that straight up, or we can cut through. See, once it says on the edge, and there we've got the hole through it. So you can see, once you have the basics of how to run this thing, you can do stuff in a hurry here. Okay, the next thing we need to look at is raw geometry versus groups and components. When I say raw geometry, this is the raw shape. So when I just click on one of these faces, it selects just that face, then that raw geometry. And why this is important is if I was to say take this other square here and let's turn that into something. Right. Now if I take this and I triple click it, it selects everything that's connected. And we'll move it. So we're going to use that M again. And I'm going to put it right on the face here somewhere. Okay. Now it's there. Because it's actually not a separate object anymore, as soon as we touch this faces together, it welded those objects. So now if I take this and I try and move it, oh, sorry, we have to exit the action first. So if I go back here and I deselect it and I come back here. Now if I triple click, it selects everything. So now if I was to manually go through and actually I can draw a selection box. Let's talk about selection boxes real quick. If I draw a selection box from left to right, you'll see the outline is solid, and you have to completely encompass the object to select it. Okay. So for instance, if I do this here, you'll see that I've only fully selected or encompassed that cylinder. So it didn't select anything here. But if I go from right to left, anything that line touches, it'll select. So if I come this way, you'll notice that the outline is now dotted. And now everything it touched, it's selected. So this is an important difference, and there are different times when you need these different capabilities. So they've really done a good job with keeping this interface simple. Okay, so now if we go back here and we try and select everything. Okay. Now if we hold our shift key down, we can select a few more things. So I can click on that. We can click on that edge. we'll orbit around. Make sure everything else is selected. Yeah, looks like it. Okay. So now let's activate the move tool. Grab this corner. Okay, so if I pick a different direction where it can't just slide it off, you'll see how it's actually attached there. So this is a problem. So now I just hit the escape key. So let's back this up a couple here. So now we're going to take this object and we're going to triple click it. Okay, now I'm going to right click on it, and I've got a choice. I can either make it a component or a group. And I'll explain the difference here in a second. But for now, we're going to make it a component. Okay, so we can give it a name. So we can just call this a cube. Now we can take this cube and we can clamp it back on. You'll notice now when I click it, it selects the whole thing, not just the edge or face that I clicked. And now if we move it straight out, you can see it's not stuck to it. And we could actually even drop it inside of it and then still pull it back out with no issues. So now, if you want to edit this, you have to either right click on it and go edit component, or you can just double click. And you'll see this little dotted line show up around it. And now you can actually make edits to it. So if I wanted to make a little change to the shape, push pull a little square chunk out of there, and now you'll see the outline changed. And then we'll just go back to our selection tool. I can just click somewhere that's not an object. Okay, now we can take this one here and we can make it a group. So now we didn't have to name it or anything, it just kind of plunked it in the general category of a group. So now it's a standalone object just like this. Now the wonderful thing about components is we can make multiples of them. So let's zoom out here a little bit. And I'm gonna move this, but I'm gonna add a modifier key. So I'm gonna actually hit my option key. Oh, sorry. That's if you're on a Mac, you use your option key. Sorry. So we're going to hit the control key for Windows, and you'll see it leaves the original, and then we can move this copy wherever we want. So let's just plunk that down there. Now what's really nice is before you do anything else, if you want more copies of this, you can actually just go times the asterisk, and then how many copies do you want all together, including this copy that you're working with. So say we want 5 altogether, so we're going to say 4, and then this will give us a total 4 added to the original, which gives us our 5. That's handy, and you can do that with grouped objects as well, and you can group multiple components together into a single grouped object, and that's one of the reasons for having the difference like that. But the beauty of this is if I go in here, my selection tool, I double click. Now if I go in here and I make a change, so let's draw a little circle on the face. And now we can go in here. And now watch carefully, those other ones you can still see, it's changing those at the same time because they're all copies of this original component. So now if we click out of that, now you can see that it made the same change to all of them. So this is a huge time saver. Okay, so just like you can move objects like this, and you'll notice that these wound up above the ground a bit. So Once again, with the move tool, you can lock to a particular direction. So if I want to move this up, I can hit the up arrow, and then I can only go vertically. Okay. Or if I hit the left arrow, then that locks it to that green axis. The red arrow locks it to that red axis. Okay. Now the other thing that you're going to do a lot is rotate. So when you've got the move tool selected, if you hover over one of these little crosses here, these face points, you can do an instant rotation. So if I grab that, click on it, and then I can just rotate it at will. And it'll snap to even numbers. So when I get to 0 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever. Okay. And just click again to set it. Now you've also got a rotation tool, which gives you a little more flexibility. So if I wanted to rotate something, I can come down here. Oh, sorry, come down here to our rotate tool, or you can hit the letter Q. And you'll notice as you move it to the different faces, it's changing what axis it's grabbing. So for this operation, we're going to grab it right here on the corner. And if you want to force it, then once again, you can use your arrow keys. So I'll grab this origin point, and then I'll grab the point I want to rotate from, or the point that I want to use as my rotation, outer rotation. And then you just move your mouse and you can set your angle. It will snap to some of these, or you can type in an angle. So if I know specifically I want 45, I can type in 45 and hit enter. Okay, just a couple more tools and then we'll be done for this one. So the next thing we're going to look at here is our tape measure tool. That's located here, and you'll notice you've got a few options if you want to take some measurements and stuff. The first thing we're going to do is kind of the most common one that will be used a lot. If you grab anywhere that's not an actual endpoint or a midpoint, just grab an edge, and then we'll click that, and you'll see this dotted line show up. So I can set that as a guideline, and that line's not actually on the model, so it's not going to break any faces or attach to edges or anything like that. So now you can just use that as a guide, and you can snap objects to it, so you can have everything lined up exactly the way you want it. It's pretty handy. Now if you need to take a measurement, you can either have a main point, so you can I could grab this midpoint, and then it'll give me a measurement to any other point that it wants to snap to. Right, so you'll just hit escape. So the next thing we've got here is an actual measuring or dimension tool. So now we can grab a measurement from this point to this point. So I click to start, click my endpoint, and then I move my mouse out here to where I want this showing up, what angle I want it going up. Click again. And you can put in text tags and a few other little things. We've got a protractor tool. So if I wanted to have it tell me what this angle was, so now you can see it'll tell me, okay, that's at 45 degrees. Now I could have started on the flat and then gone up to this point and it would have accomplished the same thing, but this will tell you the angle of your line to whatever your starting line was. and you'll notice that line turned pink. Well, that's because this is not on a standard axis, and that's a face that you can force with your down arrow key in certain circumstances. Okay, and the last tool we're going to talk about here today is the eraser tool. So there's lots of different ways you can get rid of objects. You can come in here, you can click on something, or let's say we'll triple click that, and I can just delete it with the delete key. You can do that, or you can grab the eraser tool, which is the E on the keyboard or this little icon here, and you can come up here and you could erase some particular lines or the whole object. Remember, if you want to delete a line within a grouped object or a component, you need to actually go into that object. So I'd have to double click, go in. Now I can erase. So zoom in a bit. So I could erase that line there if I wanted, which would open that face up. I could erase that. Oh, you can also use this for smoothing objects. Okay, just recenter our. Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot, when you actually enter into a grouped object or a component, it resets your world axis to the corner of that object. So there we go. So if we look here, if we take that eraser tool and then we hold the shift key down, we can actually do what's called smoothing. So it'll get rid of that line. And now, because these are such big, large faces, it's not really smoothing, but if you had something with a lot more sides and you smoothed it out, then that would make a difference. But this isn't something that's that important yet, but it becomes a lot more important later on. So if you enjoyed our tutorial today, I would ask you to hit that like button and make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.